Is Jesus God in your view?
Well, if Christianity is true, then yes.
So have you read Exodus 21, where God gives instructions to Moses about slaves?
Is that New Testament?
No. Why does it matter
well,
what
then
testament?
why are we talking about? We're talking about Jesus and his moral character.
No, sir. No, sir. No, sir. No, sir. No, sir. No, sir. You don't get a New Testament without an old one. You don't get a Jesus without the Ten Commandments. Are you throwing out the Ten Commandments? Are you throwing out Genesis? Are you throwing out Exodus?
No.
Okay, then stop asking me whether it's in the New Testament. Have you read Exodus 21?
Yes, I have, but
and doesn't Exodus 21 isn't Kendall laws in Exodus 21 doesn't God sanction slavery?
What do you mean by sanction? Regulated?
Does God suggest that it is okay for human beings to own other human beings as property, pass them on to their children, and beat them as long as they don't die within a couple days? Is that what's in Exodus 21?
I want to be clear. I want to understand what you mean by sanction. Are we talking about, because there's a difference between allowing.
Why are you dancing around it? So in Exodus 21, does God allow slavery?
He allows a certain form of slavery that isn't like what we understand to be.
Actually, Kendall, in Exodus 21, God allows two different types of slavery because there's different rules for Jewish slaves than there are for non-Jewish slaves. Jewish slaves have a completely different set of rules at the beginning of Exodus 21 than non-Jewish slaves. Jewish slaves can only be held for 7 years unless you trick them into becoming slaves forever. Non-Jewish slaves are your property to be passed on to your children. And does Exodus 21 say you can beat slaves as long as they don't die within a day or two? Yes, it does. Do you think that's moral?
We have to define what we mean by slavery.
Do you think that beating people is moral?
It is not moral. I agree.
Congratulations. You're better than your God. You're better than your Bible. And I wish you'd have been honest enough. I wish you'd have been honest enough to actually acknowledge that from the beginning. Because it's embarrassing to have people like you call in to do, oh, well, Christianity and God's good. And then when I bring up something, you're like, is that the New Testament? It doesn't make any difference if it's a New Testament, if you believe that God is responsible for the Old Testament as well. And in the Old Testament, he sanctions beating people as long as they don't die within a day or so, which you would say is immoral, which I would say is immoral, but your God is okay with. Is Jesus God in your view?
What?
Okay. I believe this guy's is an atheist based on the conversation, right? And of course the caller is a Christian, but okay, there are several things because the whole video is about moral, and then he bring up slave or slavery. And of course in Islam, I have made several videos where an atheist asked me about slavery in Islam as well, right? So I have addressed that. But to begin with, okay, he asked about New Testament, right? That to me, that is always funny when I see any Christian do that, because when they say Jesus is God, and they say it from the very beginning, right? In the beginning there was word or whatever, right? That imply, because you cannot take the image of Jesus that you have only within his time as human being, while at the same time claiming that you believe that Jesus is God, and somehow disassociate whatever God instructed in the past, in the Old Testament, from God that Jesus is based on your belief, right? So to me that is always funny whenever I saw Christian try to do that. But that is Old Testament. Is it different God? I mean, it doesn't. It's always puzzled me why certain Christians do that. Now, in terms of the position with regard to moral standing, right? I think if I do wonder what because in this case, right, you are facing an atheist, and normally, if you I've seen interaction before between Muslim and atheist. The fundamental discussion is, how would you say something is moral from your worldview, right? Because if God is the one that dictates what is moral and not, that is from the perspective of those who accept the existence of God. But if you do not believe in God, is it relative? And basically this is the major point that the atheists made, which leads to my series of video reacting to the comments from the atheist, is that for him it is relative, meaning that once upon a time those things are considered moral, but now no, it's not considered moral anymore, right? So it's relative. But then it will always continues to change, etc., right? So that's one thing. I think there's a fundamental discussion that we have to agree. Why would you think that is moral or not to begin with, right? If your worldview do not have an absolute one that determine what is moral, what is acceptable, what is not. Of course, having said that, the thing that you can do, because I'm trying to think what or who wrote those things, right? The rulings, because in the Old Testament there are rulings that many Christians try to distance themselves from, right? Because it sound, right? I think many Christians justify why the rulings of the Old Testament is very harsh, very severe, very those kind of things, is because the type of people that is being handled by God, right? Something like the sons of Israel, the Jewish tribe is in certain way that the only way for God to deal with them is from harsh standpoint of view. Is that correct to say? Because I heard that from some Christians. I just want to verify whether that is the normal perspective of Christian with regard to why the rulings found in the Old Testament are very harsh, very severe, very, or what, or is it? Yeah, I'm just curious as to how Christian normally sees this aspect in the Old Testament. Anyway, so with that, thank you for watching. Feel free to add anything that I miss with regard to this topic. Thank you for watching. See you next time.